Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Tonight we're going into the freezing cold of Alaska with 7 most disturbing, true Alaskan winter night horror stories. These scary stories come from real people who work night shifts in Alaska. Taxi drivers, delivery workers, store clerks, and security guards. They all saw something during those long, dark winter nights that they'll never forget. These are real experiences from people who lived through terrifying situations in one of the coldest and loneliest places in America. The winters there are so dark and cold that anything could be hiding out there, and no one would know. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Mr. Midnight for true horror stories that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our scary content. Now let's jump into these Alaska winter stories where people work alone in the freezing dark, where help is hours away, and where something might be watching from the shadows. Get comfortable, turn up the volume, and get ready for stories that will make you think twice about working the night shift. Let's begin. My name is Danny Morrison, and I've been working retail for 8 years. Started as a stock boy right out of high school, worked my way up to shift supervisor at Northway Market, the only 24-hour grocery store in Fairbanks, Alaska. I've handled drunk customers, shoplifters, even had a gun pulled on me during a robbery 3 years back. But what happened during the February blizzard of 2024 made me realize that sometimes the biggest threat isn't other people. Sometimes it's your own mind. I chose night shift because it paid better. Extra $3 an hour, and in a town where rent keeps going up but wages don't, every dollar matters. My wife Sarah always worried about me working alone, but I liked the quiet. Just me, the hum of the freezers, and the occasional trucker stopping for coffee and energy drinks. Simple work. Safe work. Or so I thought. Northway Market sits on the corner of University Avenue and Geist Road, a big white building with blue trim that's been there since the 80s. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting that harsh white glow on everything. The store's laid out like most grocery stores. Produce near the front, aisles running back toward the meat counter and dairy section, with the pharmacy and customer service desk up front by the registers. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. During those hours, I was responsible for stocking shelves, cleaning, handling the few customers who came in, and watching the security monitors in the back office. We had 12 cameras covering every aisle, the parking lot, and both entrances. The system was old but reliable, black and white screens that switched between cameras every 30 seconds. February 12th started normal. Day shift left at 11, and I settled in for another quiet night. The weather forecast called for snow, but in Alaska, that's like saying the sky will be blue. What they didn't predict was how bad it would get. By 2 a.m., the snow was coming down so hard I couldn't see the streetlights in the parking lot. The wind howled around the building, making it shake and groan. Around 4 a.m., I got a call from my manager, Beth. "Danny, I don't think day shift can make it in," she said. "Roads are completely blocked. You might be stuck there until this blows over." "How long are we talking?" I asked, watching the snow pile up against the front doors. "Weather service says 3 days, maybe 4. 4 days, alone, in a grocery store, with enough food to last months and a generator that could keep the power on if the grid went down. I told Beth I could handle it. I'd done solo shifts before. How hard could it be? The first voice came on my second day alone. I was restocking the cereal aisle when I heard someone talking in the soup section. Clear as day, a woman's voice saying something about chicken noodle soup. I grabbed my radio and called out, "Hello? Store's closed due to weather. You need to leave." No answer. I walked over to aisle 7 where I'd heard the voice. Empty. Just rows of Campbell's soup cans staring back at me. I checked the security monitors. Nothing. All 12 cameras showed empty aisles. Must have been the wind, I told myself. Old building, lots of cracks. Sound carries weird. But then it happened again an hour later. This time in the meat section. A man's voice talking about ground beef prices. When I got there, nobody. Cameras showed nothing. The third time, the voice said my name. "Danny? Danny, where are you?" I froze in the middle of mopping the front entrance. It was a woman's voice, coming from somewhere near the pharmacy. Sweet, familiar, almost like, "Hello?" I called out. Silence. I checked every aisle, every corner, every hiding spot in that store. Nothing. The cameras showed me wandering around talking to myself like an idiot. By day, the voices were constant. They knew things, personal things. "Danny works too hard," one voice said from the dairy section. "Sarah tells him that all the time." Sarah, my wife. How could voices in my head know about conversations I had with my wife? "He never listens," another voice added from the bread aisle. "She's getting tired of being ignored." I started talking back. "Who are you? What do you want?" "We're just customers, Danny. We shop here all the time. We know you." The strange thing was the voices felt real. More real than my own thoughts. They had different accents, different speaking patterns. Mrs. Peterson from the north side, who always complained about expired milk. Jake Williams, who bought energy drinks every night. Customers I'd helped hundreds of times. But when I looked at the security cameras, the aisles were empty. That's when I noticed the products. Soup cans arranged to spell "Hello Danny" in aisle 7. Cereal boxes stacked in a pyramid with my name written in Cheerios on the floor. Bread loaves lined up to point toward the office where I kept my jacket. The jacket with my wallet, my wedding ring when I took it off to stock heavy items, my life. I never saw them move. I'd check an aisle, find it normal, then come back an hour later to find messages written in merchandise. The cameras never caught it happening. "Your wife is cheating on you," the voice of Mrs. Peterson said on day 4. I was in the office, trying to stay warm. The heat was working, but something about the voices made me feel cold all the time. "That's not true," I said out loud. "She's with that friend of yours, Mark, the one who fixes cars." Mark, my best friend since high school. He did work on our car sometimes. Sarah called him when I was at work because I couldn't take time off for every little repair. "You're lying." "Call her," another voice suggested. Jake Williams this time. "Call her right now. See if she answers." I picked up the phone with shaking hands. It rang 4 times before Sarah answered. "Hello?" She sounded tired, distant. "Hey, it's me. Just checking in." "Oh, hi, Danny. I was sleeping. Sorry, I know it's late, or early, I don't know anymore." "Are you okay? You sound weird." "Weird." That's what she said. Not concerned, not loving. Weird. "I'm fine. What did you do today?" "Nothing much. Watched TV. Took a nap." She was lying. I could hear it in her voice, the way she paused before answering. The way she said, "Nothing much," like she was hiding something. "Did Mark come by?" Another pause. "Why would you ask that?" "Just wondering." "Danny, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" I hung up. The voices laughed. All of them. A chorus of customers I'd served for years, laughing at me like I was the dumbest man alive. "She didn't even deny it," Mrs. Peterson said. "They've been planning this for months," Jake added. "Everyone in town knows except you." I looked at the security monitors. For just a second, I swear I saw them. Sarah and Mark in aisle 3, holding hands, kissing. But when I blinked, the aisle was empty again. I stopped leaving the office after that. The voices came from everywhere now. The walls, the ceiling, the security monitors. They told me stories about how Sarah and Mark met in secret, how they laughed about poor Danny working nights while they were together, how the whole town knew and pitied me. I wrote messages on the office walls with a marker. "Sarah is a liar. Mark is not my friend. They all know. They're all laughing." The voices encouraged me. "You should do something about it," they said. "A man has to defend himself." "There's a gun in the safe." There was. Beth kept a small pistol in the office safe for emergencies. I knew the combination. She'd given it to all the supervisors in case of robberies. I opened the safe and took out the gun. It felt heavy, real, more real than anything else in that store. "They betrayed you," the voices whispered. "Both of them. You trusted them. They made a fool of you." The gun was loaded. 6 bullets, more than enough. The blizzard had stopped on the morning of day 5. Roads were still bad, but my truck could handle it. I had to get home. I had to see for myself. The voices rode with me, chattering excitedly about what I'd find, how Sarah would be surprised, how Mark would try to run, how everyone would finally know that Danny Morrison wasn't a fool. Our house looked normal from the outside. One car in the driveway, Sarah's Honda. Mark's truck was nowhere to be seen, but he could have parked it anywhere. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, gun in my lap, listening to the voices plan what I should do. Go through the back door. Surprise them. Make them confess. Make them pay. I used my key to enter through the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the heater running. No voices from other rooms. No sounds of betrayal. I walked to our bedroom. The door was open. Sarah was there. Alone. Sleeping peacefully in our bed, wearing the old t-shirt she always wore to sleep. Her face was calm, innocent, beautiful. There was no Mark, no affair, no conspiracy. Just my wife, sleeping alone while her husband stood in the doorway pointing a gun at her with tears running down his face. The voices were gone. Completely gone. The silence was so loud it hurt my ears. Sarah opened her eyes and saw me. Saw the gun. Her face went white. "Danny? What are you doing?" I thought..." My voice cracked. "They said you were cheating. They said everyone knew." "Who said that?" "Danny, you're scaring me." I looked at the gun in my hands. How had I gotten here? How had I believed voices that weren't real? "I'm sick," I whispered. "I'm really sick." I drove myself to the hospital that morning. Sarah followed in her car, crying the whole way. I told the doctors everything. The voices, the isolation, the paranoia, the gun. They kept me for 2 weeks. Psychiatric evaluation. The doctors said it was a complete psychotic break brought on by extreme isolation and stress. Turns out, people who work alone in isolated places for long periods can develop auditory hallucinations and paranoid delusions. It's more common than anyone talks about. The brain needs social contact. Without it, it starts making its own. I quit my job at Northway Market. Couldn't handle being alone anymore. Got work at a warehouse where there's always other people around. Day shift only. Sarah forgave me, but it took time. Marriage counseling, individual therapy, medication that keeps the voices quiet. Most days I'm fine now. But sometimes when I'm stressed or tired, I hear whispers, familiar voices telling me things that aren't true. Now I know what they are. Symptoms of a brain that was pushed too far. I started speaking at safety meetings for companies with isolated workers, night security guards, long-haul truckers, lighthouse keepers, anyone who works alone for long periods. The message is simple. Check on your people. Make sure they're not losing touch with reality. Because isolation doesn't just threaten your body, it can destroy your mind. And sometimes, your mind can turn you into the very monster you're afraid of becoming. The scariest part? If Sarah hadn't woken up when she did, if she'd screamed or run, I might have pulled that trigger. The voices would have won. I know now that the most dangerous place you can be isn't a dark alley or a bad neighborhood. It's alone with your own thoughts for too long. Because your mind can become your worst enemy when you're truly alone. My name is Carlos Mendez, and I've been driving the only taxi in Coldfoot, Alaska for 12 years. When I say the only taxi, I mean it. Population 47 in winter, maybe 200 in summer when the tourists come through. Most folks here have trucks or snowmobiles, but sometimes you get stranded travelers who need a ride, especially when their rental cars can't handle our roads. I started this job after my construction work dried up. The pay isn't great, but it's steady, and I know every back road, every shortcut, every safe spot to pull over when the weather gets bad. In Alaska, knowing the roads can mean the difference between getting home safe and freezing to death in a ditch. I've pulled more than a few people out of trouble over the years. Dead batteries, flat tires, cars stuck in snowdrifts. The state police know me, the local rangers know me, and my dispatcher, Sarah, has been routing calls to me since day one. But what happened last February during the worst blizzard in 20 years changed everything I thought I knew about these mountains. I always believed the most dangerous thing on these roads was the weather. I was wrong. It was February 18th, around 11 p.m., when Sarah's voice crackled through my radio. The snow had been falling for 6 hours straight, and the wind was howling so hard it shook my 2018 Crown Vic. I was parked at Murphy's Diner, drinking coffee and waiting for the storm to ease up. "Carlos, you there?" Sarah's voice sounded tired. She'd been working dispatch for 14 hours straight because her night guy called in sick. "Yeah, I'm here. What's up?" "Got a pickup request. Highway 143 about mile marker 67. Guy says his car broke down." I groaned. Mile marker 67 was 20 minutes out in good weather. In this storm, it would take me 40 minutes just to get there. "Sarah, it's a whiteout. Can't this wait until morning?" He sounds pretty desperate. "Carlos says he's been waiting 2 hours already." I looked out at the snow swirling in my headlights. The highway department had stopped plowing an hour ago, but this was my job, and people die in weather like this. "All right, I'm heading out. Keep the radio on." My taxi was equipped with snow tires, chains, and emergency gear, blankets, flares, a first aid kit, and a CB radio that could reach the state police if my regular radio failed. I'd also installed extra headlights and a spotlight after getting stuck in a storm 3 years back. The heater worked overtime, but the windshield kept fogging up, and the wipers were fighting a losing battle against the ice. The drive out was hell. I couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead, and the road was covered in at least 8 inches of fresh snow. My GPS showed I was on Highway 143, but everything looked the same. White. I had to stop twice to clear my windshield and check my mirrors for ice buildup. When I finally reached mile marker 67, I saw a dark sedan buried in snow up to its bumpers. A man in a business suit was standing next to it, waving his arms. He looked wrong for this place. City clothes, dress shoes, no winter gear. I pulled over and hit my hazard lights. He practically dove into my back seat. "Thank God," he said, breathing hard. "I've been out here for hours. My phone's dead, my car won't start, and this storm just keeps getting worse." I cranked up the heat and turned around to look at him. He was maybe 40, balding, with glasses fogged from the temperature change. But what struck me was how nervous he looked. He kept checking the rear window, like he expected something to follow him. "Where you headed?" I asked. "Fairbanks. But listen, can you take the back roads? Stay off the main highway." "Back roads in this weather? That's not safe, buddy. Highway 143 is the only plowed route to—" "Please," he grabbed at my shoulder. "I'll pay extra. Just don't use the highway." I shrugged. His money. "What's your name?" "David. David Chen." "All right, David, I'm Carlos." "What's got you so spooked?" He was quiet for a minute, just staring out the back window. "Something's been following me." I checked my mirrors. Nothing but snow and darkness. "Following you how?" "Headlights. For the last 50 miles, the same headlights. Every time I slowed down, they slowed down. When I stopped, they stopped." I put the car in drive and started heading toward Old Mining Road, a back route that would add 30 minutes to the trip. "Could be another driver trying to stay close for safety. Happens a lot in storms." "No." David shook his head. This was different. The lights were too high up, too far apart, and when my car died, I saw... He trailed off. "Saw what?" "You're going to think I'm crazy. Try me." David took a deep breath. "I saw something kill a moose. Right on the highway. Something big." I almost laughed, but the look on his face stopped me. "David, we've got bears, wolves, even the occasional lynx up here. They hunt." This wasn't hunting. This was the execution, and whatever did it was the size of a small truck. I focused on driving. The back roads were worse than I expected. No tire tracks, deeper snow, and my GPS kept losing signal. But David seemed to relax a little as we got further from the highway. That's when I saw the headlights. 2 bright spots in my rearview mirror, maybe a quarter mile back. They appeared right after we passed Junction Creek, like they'd been waiting. "David," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "take a look behind us." He turned around and went white. "That's them. That's the same lights." I watched the headlights in my mirror. They were keeping pace with us, but something was off. The lights were too high for a normal car, and they swayed slightly, like whatever was carrying them was moving up and down. "Could be a truck," I said, but I didn't believe it myself. "Drive faster." I pressed the accelerator, but not too hard. Losing C2 control in this snow would kill us both. The speedometer hit 40, which was pushing it for these conditions. The headlights kept pace. We drove in silence for 10 minutes, the tension building. Then David pointed ahead. "Stop the car." "What?" "Stop the car. Look." I hit the brakes, and we slid to a stop. In my headlights, I could see twisted metal scattered across the road. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at, the remains of at least 3 vehicles, torn apart and scattered like toys. "Jesus," I whispered. I grabbed my spotlight and swept it across the scene. A red pickup truck was flipped upside down, its roof caved in. A white SUV was split almost in half. And beyond them, a Honda Civic that looked like it had been stepped on by something enormous. The snow around the wreckage was dark with blood. "We need to call this in," I said, reaching for my radio. Static. I tried the CB radio. More static. "Sarah, this is Carlos. Emergency on Old Mining Road, mile..." "Sarah?" "Nothing." David was hyperventilating. "It's not letting us call for help. It wants us isolated." "What wants us isolated?" Before he could answer, the headlights behind us started moving. Not driving, moving. Up and down, side to side, like they were attached to something that was walking. I floored the accelerator. My Crown Vic lurched forward, tires spinning before finding traction. In the mirror, I watched those impossible headlights start to follow us, and they were moving faster than any vehicle should be able to in this snow. "What the hell is that thing?" I shouted. "I don't know." David was gripping the door handle. "But it killed my business partner 6 hours ago." The headlights were getting closer. I could see them bouncing as whatever was carrying them ran through the snow. Not drove, ran. I took a sharp right onto Prospector's Trail, hoping to lose our pursuer in the wind-in, the mountain path. The taxi's suspension groaned as we hit deep ruts, but the engine held steady. Behind us, the headlights never missed the turn. "How is it keeping up?" I muttered. That's when I made the mistake of really looking in my rearview mirror. The headlights weren't attached to a vehicle. They were eyes. 2 massive, glowing eyes set in a head that was running on 4 legs through the snow like it was nothing. The thing was huge, bigger than a bear, bigger than a moose, moving with impossible speed and grace. "Do you see it?" David whispered. "Yeah, I see it." The creature was gaining on us. In the glow of its own eyes, I could make out a shape that looked like a wolf, but wrong. Too big, too intelligent. And when it opened its mouth, I saw teeth like railroad spikes. I pushed the Crown Vic as hard as I dared, but on these icy back roads, 50 was my limit. The creature was doing at least 60 and gaining fast. It leaped. The impact hit my trunk like a sledgehammer. The rear window exploded inward, covering us with safety glass. David screamed. I fought to keep control as claws scraped along my roof. The creature was on top of my taxi. I slammed on the brakes. The sudden stop should have thrown the thing off, but instead I heard metal tearing. It was using its claws for grip, peeling back my roof like a can opener. "Get out!" I yelled. "Now!" David and I bailed out into the snow as the creature tore through my roof. My spotlight was still working, and in its beam, I got my first clear look at the thing. It was like a wolf, but it stood 7 feet tall at the shoulder. Its fur was white with silver markings, and its eyes glowed with their own light. When it looked at me, I saw intelligence there. Cold, calculating intelligence. It wasn't just an animal, it was a hunter. David and I ran into the trees. The snow was knee-deep and every step was a struggle, but terror gave us strength. Behind us, I could hear the creature finishing off my taxi. metal screaming as it was torn apart. We made it maybe 100 yards before David tripped. He went down hard, and when I turned to help him up, the creature was there. It had moved through the forest without making a sound. David tried to crawl away, but there was nowhere to go. The creature stepped forward almost casually and placed one massive paw on his back. "Please," David whispered. "Please don't." The creature's jaws closed around his head. I ran through the snow, through the trees, with no plan except to get away from that thing. My lungs burned, my legs shook, but I kept running until I saw lights ahead. The old ranger station. I'd forgotten it was up here. I threw myself against the door. Locked. I smashed the window with a rock and climbed inside, then dragged a desk against the door and a bookshelf against the broken window. The ranger's radio was still working. "Mayday, mayday, this is Carlos Mendez. I need immediate assistance at the old Forest Service station on Prospector's Trail. There's been an attack, multiple casualties. I need state police and armed backup immediately." The voice that answered was calm and professional. "Copy that, Carlos. Units are en route. Stay where you are." I huddled in the corner, watching the windows. 20 minutes later, I saw flashlights and heard voices calling my name. The state troopers found me in shock, covered in David's blood from the broken glass. They found the wreckage of my taxi, torn apart like paper. They found David's body, or what was left of it. What they didn't find was the creature. They found tracks, massive paw prints leading into the wilderness where no vehicle could follow. The forensics team said the attack pattern was unlike anything they'd seen. The bite marks were too big for any known predator. The investigation lasted 3 months. They found evidence of 23 missing travelers over the past 2 winters, people whose cars had broken down on remote highways during storms. The pattern was always the same: severe weather, isolated location, no witnesses. The highway department closed Old Mining Road and Prospector's Trail permanently. They put up barriers and warning signs about unstable conditions. But I know the real reason. I quit driving taxi the day I got out of the hospital. Moved to Anchorage, where there are always people around, always lights, always help nearby. I work in a warehouse now, loading trucks. Safe, predictable work with concrete walls and security cameras. But sometimes when I'm driving home from work and I see headlights in my rearview mirror, my hands start shaking. And on nights when the snow falls heavy and the wind howls, I remember those glowing eyes and the sound of metal tearing. The official reports say it was a bear attack. The wildlife experts insist there's no predator in Alaska capable of what I described. But I was there. I saw what hunted those mountains, using the storms to trap travelers, herding them like cattle to slaughter. Whatever that thing was, it's still out there, still hunting. And it's smarter than any animal has a right to be. That's why I'm telling this story. If you're ever driving through Alaska in winter and you break down on a lonely highway and you see headlights that move wrong in your mirrors, don't wait for help. Run. My name is Angela Martinez, and I've been working as a cook for 18 years. I started in busy city kitchens where you had to move fast and work clean or you'd get fired. After years of dealing with crazy hours and rude customers, I moved to Alaska for something quieter. I got a job at Murphy's Diner in a small fishing town called Coldwater Bay. The pay wasn't great, but the work was steady and the people were nice. I thought I'd found the perfect place to spend the rest of my career. But what happened during the winter of 2024 changed everything I thought I knew about small towns. Some things that look human aren't human at all. Coldwater Bay has about 800 people who live there year-round. In summer, tourists come for fishing trips and the population doubles. But in winter, it's just us locals. The town sits on a rocky coast with one main dock where the fishing boats come in. There's a grocery store, a gas station, a hardware store, and Murphy's Diner. That's about it. Murphy's Diner is a small place with maybe 15 tables and a counter with 6 stools. The kitchen is tiny but well-equipped. I work the dinner shift from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., Tuesday through Saturday. During tourist season, we're packed every night. But in winter, we mostly serve the same 30 or 40 locals who eat out regularly. The owner, Dave Murphy, is a good guy who treats his employees right. He hired me because his previous cook moved to Anchorage, and he needed someone who could handle the winter rush when the fishing boats come back with their catch. The job is simple: basic American food, fish specials, and hearty portions for people who work hard outdoors. I rent a small apartment about 6 blocks from the diner. To get to my car after work, I have to walk past the main dock. It's usually not a problem. The street has lights, and there are always a few people around, even late at night. Fishermen come and go at all hours depending on the tides. The kitchen at Murphy's has 2 gas ranges, a large grill, a deep fryer, and a walk-in cooler. I know every inch of that kitchen. The equipment is old but reliable. The ranges burn hot and fast, perfect for busy nights. The walk-in cooler is where I store the fish that comes in fresh every day. It's cold enough that your breath makes clouds when you go inside. During my shift, I'm usually alone in the kitchen after 6 p.m. when the prep cook goes home. Dave handles the front of house and helps with dishes when needed. It's a simple operation, and I like working by myself. I can focus on the food and not worry about anyone else's mistakes. In November 2024, I started noticing that some of our regular customers weren't coming in anymore. First, it was Tom Bradley, an old fisherman who ate dinner at the counter every Tuesday and Friday. Then Sarah Chen, a teacher who came in for fish and chips every Thursday after work. By December, 6 of our regulars had just stopped showing up. When I asked Dave about it, he said maybe people were tightening their budgets for Christmas. When I mentioned it to other customers, they got quiet and changed the subject. Small towns are weird about gossip, so I didn't push it. But it was strange. These weren't people who seemed like they were struggling for money. The first time I realized something was really wrong was when I asked Betty Morrison about Tom Bradley. Betty knows everyone in town and usually loves to talk. But when I mentioned Tom, her face went white and she just said, "I heard he went to visit family in Fairbanks." Then she quickly paid her bill and left. Betty had never cut a conversation short in the 3 years I'd known her. I tried asking Dave if he'd heard anything, but he just shrugged and said people move around in winter. He seemed nervous about it too, which wasn't like him. Dave is usually an open book who'll talk your ear off about anything. That's when I started paying attention to the local news. I found out that 6 people had been reported missing over the past month. All of them were last seen walking alone near the docks after dark. The police said they were investigating, but they didn't have any leads. In a town of 800 people, 6 missing persons is huge news, but nobody wanted to talk about it. I work until 11 p.m., and the walk to my car takes me right past the main dock. I'd been making that walk for 3 years without ever feeling scared, but now I started hurrying. The dock area has 2 streetlights, but there are long shadows between the boats. During winter, the boats are pulled up on shore and covered with tarps, creating even more dark spaces. On December 15th, I was walking to my car after a busy Friday night. It was about 11:30 p.m. and the temperature was around 10 degrees. The wind was coming off the water, making it feel even colder. I was walking fast, looking forward to getting home and warming up. That's when I saw someone standing at the end of the main pier. They were perfectly still, facing out toward the water. In winter, nobody goes out on the pier at night. It's icy and dangerous, and there's no reason to be there. I stopped and squinted through the darkness. The person looked familiar, but something was wrong with their posture. They were too stiff, like a mannequin. I called out, "Hey, are you okay?" My voice echoed off the water. The figure turned around slowly, too slowly. It took at least 5 seconds for them to complete the turn, like they were moving underwater. When they faced me, I saw it was Tom Bradley, the fisherman who'd been missing for 3 weeks. But Tom's face was wrong. His skin was drooping like melted wax. His left cheek had slid down toward his jaw, and his right eye had sunk deep into his skull. His mouth was hanging open, and I could see too much of his teeth. He looked like a rubber mask that was falling apart. I screamed and ran back toward the diner. My feet slipped on the icy sidewalk, and I nearly fell twice. I didn't look back until I reached the front door of Murphy's. When I turned around, the pier was empty. I called the police from the diner phone. 2 officers came out and searched the entire dock area with flashlights. They didn't find anything. No footprints, no evidence that anyone had been there. They took my statement, but I could tell they thought I was seeing things. One of them suggested that stress and the long winter days can play tricks on your mind. But I knew what I had seen. Tom Bradley had been standing on that pier. and his face was melting like wax. The next night I saw two more of them. Sarah Chen and another missing person, Mike Petrov, were walking down Main Street together. It was around 10 p.m., and I was taking out the trash behind the diner. They were moving in that same slow, jerky way, like their bodies weren't working right. Sarah's hair was falling out in clumps, and Mike's left arm was hanging at a weird angle, like the bones inside weren't connected properly. They walked past the diner without looking in my direction, but I could see the same melted, drooping skin on both of their faces. I watched them until they disappeared around the corner toward the residential area. Then I went back inside and locked both the front and back doors of the diner. I called Dave and told him I was closing early because I felt sick. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what I'd seen. These weren't the missing people. They couldn't be. Something was wearing their bodies like clothes, but the clothes were falling apart. I spent the next day researching online. I searched for melting faces, body snatchers, and shapeshifters. Most of what I found was garbage, but buried in some obscure forums and blog posts, I found stories from other remote communities, places in northern Canada, Siberia, and Alaska where people reported similar creatures. They were called different names in different places: skinwalkers, body thieves, hollow men. But the descriptions were always the same: beings that steal human appearances but can't maintain them properly. The stolen bodies decay and fall apart, especially in cold weather. According to these stories, the creatures are some kind of parasite. They live inside the stolen bodies, controlling them like puppets. But they need warmth to keep the bodies from decomposing too quickly. That's why they're drawn to heated buildings, especially places with ovens or furnaces. I realized they were watching Murphy's Diner. We keep the ovens running until closing time, and the kitchen stays warm even in the middle of winter. I was working late shifts alone, surrounded by heat sources. I was the perfect target. That night, I saw them outside the restaurant windows. 3 of the missing people, their faces pressed against the glass, staring at me while I worked. Their breath should have fogged up the windows, but it didn't. When they moved away, they left smears on the glass that looked like grease mixed with something darker. I called Dave and told him I needed to quit. But when I explained why, he begged me to stay one more night. He said he'd already lost 3 employees this winter, and if I quit too, he'd have to close the restaurant. He offered to pay me double for Saturday night if I'd just work one more shift. I should have said no. But Dave had been good to me, and I needed the money. I told him I'd work Saturday, but only if he stayed late with me. He agreed. Saturday night was slow. Only a few customers came in, and they all left by 9 p.m. Dave helped me clean up, and we were almost ready to close when the power went out. The whole block went dark except for the emergency lights in the diner. Dave went to check the circuit breaker, leaving me alone in the kitchen. That's when I heard the back door open. I grabbed a large knife from the prep counter and called out, "Dave, is that you?" The footsteps coming toward the kitchen weren't Dave's. They were too slow and irregular, like someone learning how to walk. I backed up against the stove and raised the knife. Tom Bradley walked into the kitchen first. Up close, I could see that his entire face was sliding downward. His nose had shifted to the left side of his face, and one of his ears was hanging by what looked like a thread of skin. Behind him came Sarah Chen and Mike Petrov, both in the same state of decay. But the worst part was their eyes. They were completely black, like there was nothing behind them. And when they moved, I could hear wet, sliding sounds coming from inside their bodies. "We need your warmth," Tom said, but his voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere else. His mouth moved, but the timing was wrong, like a badly dubbed movie. I threw the knife at Tom and grabbed a pot of boiling oil from the stove. The knife went right through his chest without slowing him down. But when I splashed the oil on his face, his skin melted completely away. Underneath the human skin was something pale and boneless, like a giant slug with too many teeth. It shrieked and writhed, trying to control the body it was wearing. But the body was falling apart now, collapsing like an empty suit. I dumped the rest of the oil on Sarah and Mike. Their stolen skin melted away too, revealing the same pale, worm-like creatures inside. They were controlling the human bodies from the inside, like wearing them as costumes. The creatures without their human disguises were even more horrible. They moved like giant maggots, leaving trails of slime behind them. But they were fast, much faster than when they were pretending to be human. I grabbed every pot and pan I could reach and started throwing hot oil and boiling water at them. The heat made them shriek and retreat toward the back door. I followed them, pouring more oil about and turning on all the gas burners. By the time Dave came back, the creatures had fled through the back door. I told him we had to burn the restaurant down. When he saw the melted skin and slime trails all over his kitchen, he didn't argue. We called the fire department and told them there had been a grease fire. The building burned completely. During the investigation, they found the remains of 6 bodies in the basement. All of them were completely hollow, like empty shells. The police investigation revealed that the creatures had been living in the storm drains under the town. They had been taking people one by one, wearing their bodies during the day and retreating underground at night. The warm kitchen at Murphy's was their main source of heat for keeping the stolen bodies from falling apart too quickly. The FBI got involved, classifying it as a biological contamination event. The entire town was quietly evacuated over the next month. Coldwater Bay was declared off-limits due to environmental hazards. The official story was that toxic chemicals from old mining operations had leaked into the groundwater. I moved to Phoenix immediately. I couldn't stand the cold anymore. Even now, 3 months later, I still have nightmares about melting faces and wet, sliding sounds. I've learned that these creatures appear in isolated communities during harsh winters, when people are most vulnerable and least likely to be believed. I found an online group of people who've encountered similar things. We share information and try to warn others. I know these creatures are still out there, stealing bodies and infiltrating small communities where nobody will notice until it's too late. I work at a busy restaurant in Phoenix now, never alone, always surrounded by people. I carry a small container of pepper spray that's actually filled with hot sauce. It's not much, but it makes me feel better. And I never ever work the night shift anymore. Some things that look human are just wearing human skin, and they're always hungry for something warmer. My name is Carl Henderson, and I've been fixing heating and cooling systems in Anchorage for 15 years. I started right out of high school, working with my uncle's company before getting my own contractor license. I've crawled through every kind of basement, attic, and crawl space you can imagine. Frozen pipes in January, broken air conditioners in summer, rats in the vents. I thought I'd seen it all. But what happened last winter in that low-income housing complex on the east side changed everything I thought I knew about what could be living right under our feet. It was a Tuesday morning in February when my phone rang at 6 a.m. The caller ID showed it was Mrs. Rodriguez, the building manager at Northwind Apartments. She sounded panicked. "Carl, we need you here right now. The heating system is completely dead and it's -20 outside. I've got 40 families with no heat." I grabbed my toolbox and thermal scanner. Northwind was one of those older buildings from the 80s. 4 stories of small apartments housing mostly families on assistance. I'd been there before for routine maintenance. Nothing too complicated. When I arrived, Mrs. Rodriguez met me in the lobby, wrapping a heavy coat around her shoulders. "It's not just the heat," she said, leading me toward the basement stairs. "The tenants are complaining about weird noises in the vents, scratching sounds like animals, and crying. Some of them swear they hear children crying in the walls." I followed her down the narrow concrete steps. The basement was freezing, my breath coming out in white puffs. The main heating unit sat silent in the corner, a big gas furnace that should have been humming along on a day like this. I knelt down and opened the furnace panel. Everything looked normal until I started checking the ductwork. That's when I saw the damage. The metal ducts had been torn apart from the inside. Long scratches ran along the aluminum surfaces, and what looked like bite marks had punctured the metal in several places. Some of the holes were big enough to fit my fist through. "Looks like you've got animals in the system," I told Mrs. Rodriguez. "Probably rats or maybe squirrels. They can do a lot of damage when they get trapped." But even as I said it, something felt wrong. The scratches were too big for rats, and they were too organized, like something had deliberately clawed its way through the metal, not just panicked and scrambled around. I started my repairs, replacing the damaged sections with new ductwork. The furnace fired right up once I had the system sealed again. But as I worked, I kept hearing things. Soft crying sounds echoing through the vents above my head. At first I thought it might be kids in the apartments upstairs. Sound travels weird through ductwork sometimes, but the crying seemed to move. It would start near the furnace, then drift through the system, getting fainter as it went deeper into the building. I grabbed my flashlight and started following the main duct that led to the upper floors. The crying stopped every time I got close, like whatever was making the sound knew I was coming. Mrs. Rodriguez followed me as I checked different parts of the basement. "The tenants have been telling me crazy stories," she said. "They claim they've seen small figures crawling through the vents at night, moving on all fours like animals but shaped like people." I stopped what I was doing. "What do you mean, shaped like people?" "Child-sized, they say. But moving wrong. Too fast, too flexible. Mrs. Patterson in 3B swears one of them looked right at her through the vent grate in her bedroom. Said it had huge eyes and pale skin." I'd heard stranger things from tenants over the years. People see shadows, hear settling noises, and their images. Vision fills in the blanks. But the damage to the ductwork was real. "I'm going to set up some cameras," I told her. "If there are animals in the system, we need to know what we're dealing with before I can fix this properly." I installed 3 small security cameras in different parts of the basement that night, motion activated with infrared for night vision. If something was living in the ducts, I'd catch it on video. The next morning, I came back to check the footage. What I saw made my hands shake as I held the camera. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m. when the first one appeared. A small figure dropped down from one of the upper vents. It moved on hands and knees, but it wasn't an animal. The shape was definitely human, arms, legs, a head, but it moved like an insect, joints bending in ways that seemed wrong. Its skin was pale, almost white in the infrared camera. Its eyes reflected the light like an animal's, appearing as bright white circles in the darkness. More of them appeared throughout the night, 7 or 8 total, crawling through the basement, going in and out of different ducts. They moved with purpose, like they knew exactly where they were going. I watched the footage 3 times before calling Mrs. Rodriguez. "We need to talk," I said. That afternoon I went home and started searching online. Small humanoids in vents, creatures in basements, urban cryptids, anything that might explain what I'd captured on camera. That's when I found the stories about tunnel children. According to the websites I found, tunnel children were an urban legend in several major cities. The stories claimed they were people who had adapted to living underground, in abandoned subway tunnels, forgotten basements, and the spaces between buildings. They supposedly lived by stealing small items from the apartments above them: food, jewelry, electronics, anything they could carry through vents and small openings. Most websites treated it like a modern myth, but some of the stories were detailed enough to make me uncomfortable. Reports from maintenance workers, security guards, and building superintendents who claimed to have encountered them. The descriptions matched what I'd seen on camera: small, pale, moving on all fours, with oversized eyes adapted for darkness. The next day, I went back to Northwind with better equipment: high-powered flashlights, a respirator mask, and a crowbar. If something was living in that building, I was going to find where. I started in the basement, following the ductwork to a section I hadn't explored yet. Behind the furnace, a narrow crawl space led to what looked like an old utility room that had been walled off during renovations. I pried open the drywall with my crowbar and shined my light inside. The smell hit me first, musty and sweet, like old garbage mixed with something organic. The room beyond was bigger than I expected, maybe 10 feet by 12 feet, and it was full of stolen things. Electronics were stacked against one wall: phones, tablets, small televisions. Jewelry hung from makeshift hooks driven into the concrete. Piles of clothing, food containers, and household items covered the floor. But what made my stomach turn were the decorations. Human teeth were arranged in careful patterns along the walls. Fingernails had been glued to the concrete in spiral designs. Hair of different colors hung in braids from the ceiling. In the center of the room was what looked like a bed made from stolen blankets and clothing. Dark stains covered the fabric. I backed out of the room and called Mrs. Rodriguez immediately. "Don't let anyone into the basement," I told her. "Call the police. We've got a serious problem." It took 3 days for the authorities to piece together what had been happening at Northwind Apartments. The police found evidence that residents had been drugged through the ventilation system. Small amounts of sedatives had been pumped into the air supply on a regular schedule, making tenants sleep more deeply than normal. While they slept, the tunnel children had been harvesting them, not killing them. That would have been discovered too quickly. Instead, they were taking small amounts. A tooth here, fingernails there, hair cut while people slept. The drugs made sure the victims wouldn't wake up or remember what happened. Medical examinations of the tenants revealed that dozens of people had been victims. Missing teeth they couldn't remember losing, fingernails that had been cut too short, patches of hair that had been trimmed. The psychological effect was almost worse than the physical harm. People had been living with gaps in their memory, feeling like something was wrong, but not knowing what. As the investigation expanded, police discovered that Northwind wasn't an isolated case. The tunnel children had been using the city's old utility tunnels to move between buildings across Anchorage. Steam tunnels from the 70s, abandoned subway plans, and forgotten basements had been connected into a network that stretched for miles underground. Evidence of similar operations was found in 12 other apartment buildings. Always low-income housing where tenants were less likely to complain or be believed if they reported strange experiences. The creatures themselves were never caught. When police moved in with search teams, they found the nest areas abandoned. The tunnel children had disappeared deeper into the underground system. I was finishing my final safety inspection at Northwind when they came for me. I was alone in the basement, checking the ductwork one last time to make sure everything was sealed properly. The building was scheduled to reopen the next day. That's when I heard the scratching. Not from the vents this time, from the walls themselves. The drywall I'd broken through earlier started to bulge outward. Something was pushing against it from behind. Multiple somethings. The wall burst open and they poured through. 5 of them, moving faster than I'd seen in the camera footage. Their pale skin looked almost translucent in my flashlight beam, and their eyes reflected the light like mirrors. They moved like spiders, low to the ground but incredibly quick. Long fingers ended in what looked like claws, fingernails grown out and sharpened to points. The first one reached me before I could move. Its claws raked across my arm, tearing through my work shirt and into the skin beneath. The pain was immediate and intense, like being injected with acid. I swung my flashlight like a club, catching one of them across the side of the head. It made a sound, not quite human but not animal either. A hissing shriek that echoed through the basement. I ran for my toolbox and grabbed the first thing I could reach, a propane torch I used for soldering pipes. The flame caught the nearest tunnel child across the chest. It screamed and fell backward, but the others kept coming. I backed toward the stairs, sweeping the torch back and forth. The creatures stayed just out of range, circling me like pack animals. That's when I heard more of them above, scratching and movement from every floor of the building. The ones attacking me had called for help. I made it to the stairwell and ran. Behind me, their screams echoed through the basement, a sound like nothing I'd ever heard before. The infection from their claws put me in the hospital for a week. The doctors said I was lucky. Whatever was on their fingernails could have been much worse. As it was, I lost feeling in 3 fingers of my left hand. The nerve damage is permanent. The city ordered inspections of every underground space in Anchorage, utility tunnels, basements, storm drains, anywhere the tunnel children might be hiding. They found evidence of the creatures in dozens of locations, but never caught any of them. The network was too extensive, with too many places to hide. Mrs. Rodriguez had to relocate 40 families while the building was cleaned and secured. Most of them still have nightmares about what was done to them. Some of the children refuse to sleep in rooms with air vents. I don't do routine maintenance work anymore. After word got out about what happened at Northwind, I started getting calls from other cities. Portland, Seattle, Detroit. Places where maintenance workers and building managers had found similar evidence but didn't know what they were dealing with. I've helped identify tunnel children infestations in 6 different cities now. The pattern is always the same: low-income housing, Old buildings with accessible underground areas, and tenants who report strange experiences that get dismissed as imagination. The creatures are real, and they're more widespread than anyone wants to admit. I still wake up some nights thinking about those pale faces and reflecting eyes, about the systematic way they had been harvesting people, taking what they needed while keeping their victims alive and unaware. If you live in an older apartment building and you hear scratching in the vents, don't ignore it. If you find yourself waking up tired even after a full night's sleep, or if you notice small things missing that you can't explain, pay attention. Check your air vents. Look for scratches around the grate edges. If the screws look like they've been loosened and retightened, call someone immediately. The tunnel children are still down there. They've just gotten better at hiding, and they're always looking for new places to feed. My name is Derek Martinez, and I've been driving for rideshare companies for 8 years now. Started with Uber back in 2017, then added Lyft to make more money. I drive nights mostly, sometimes weekends here in Fairbanks, Alaska. Got my commercial driver's license, clean driving record, 5-star rating from over 3,000 rides. I've picked up drunk college kids, helped old folks get to doctor appointments, driven people to the airport at 4 a.m. Done it all. I started driving because my wife Sarah works at First National Bank during the day, and we needed extra money for our 2 kids, Emma's 8 and Jake's 6. They go to Lincoln Elementary. Between Sarah's salary and my driving, we make ends meet. It's honest work. I know these roads like the back of my hand, especially the highways leading out of town. I've had my share of weird passengers, drunk people who think I'm their therapist, folks who don't tip. Had one guy try to bring his goat in the car. I'm not kidding. But what happened last February during that big snowstorm changed everything I thought I knew about who gets in my car. Now I check my rearview mirror for things I never thought I'd need to look for. February 15th was one of those nights where normal people stay home. Temperature hit -20. Wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour. Snow coming down so hard you could barely see 10 feet ahead. The kind of night where the smart drivers log off and go home to their families. But that's when you make the most money. Surge pricing kicks in. People get desperate for rides, and guys like me who know how to drive in this weather can pull in $200 in a few hours. My 2018 Honda Civic isn't much to look at, but it's got all-wheel drive and good tires. I keep emergency supplies in the trunk: blankets, water, protein bars, a first aid kit, jumper cables, and a small shovel. I'd been on line for about 3 hours, mostly picking up people from downtown bars who didn't want to walk to their cars in the storm. Easy rides, good tips. My phone was charging on the dashboard mount, GPS running, both Uber and Lyft apps active, radio tuned to local traffic reports, everything routine. Around 11:30 p.m. I got a ping on the Uber app. Pickup location showed as Murphy's gas station on the Steese Highway, about 20 miles northeast of downtown. The destination was listed as an address on 2nd Avenue downtown, about a $40 ride with surge pricing. Good money. But Murphy's closed at 9 p.m. on weeknights. I knew that because I'd stopped there for coffee plenty of times. The app showed the passenger's name as Michael K., with a 4.8 rating from 12 previous rides. Nothing unusual there. I almost declined the ride. 20 miles out in this weather to a closed gas station seemed weird, but the money was too good to pass up, and maybe the guy was stranded. I'd helped stranded drivers before. It's part of the job. I called the number listed in the app. It went straight to voicemail with no personal message, just the automated system. I sent a text. On my way to Murphy's. Bad weather, might take 30 minutes. No response. The drive out to Murphy's took 45 minutes. Highway crews had been through earlier, but fresh snow covered everything again. I passed maybe 3 other vehicles the whole way. My headlights cut through the storm, windshield wipers working overtime. When I pulled into Murphy's parking lot, the place was dark except for one security light over the front door. The building looked abandoned, snow piled up against the windows. But there was a man standing under the overhang by the door, like he'd been waiting. He was wearing a dark coat and pants, no hat, which seemed weird for the weather. As I pulled up, He walked toward my car with Nornia. Mal steps, not hurrying despite the cold. When he got to the back door, I unlocked it and he slid in. "Thanks for coming out in this weather," he said. His voice sounded normal, maybe a little tired. "I really appreciate it." "No problem," I said, turning around to look at him. "You okay? This place has been closed for hours." He was probably in his 30s, clean-shaven, dark hair. Looked like a businessman maybe, nice clothes. He was checking his phone and looking around the parking lot nervously. "Car broke down earlier," he said. "Had to call someone to pick me up here." I nodded and put the car in drive. 2nd Avenue downtown, right? "That's right." As I pulled back onto the highway, I glanced in my rearview mirror to check on him, like I always do with passengers. But the back seat looked empty. I could hear him breathing, could hear him shifting around, but the mirror showed nobody there. I blinked hard and looked again. Still nothing in the reflection. But when I turned around, he was sitting right there, scrolling through his phone. "Everything all right?" he asked, noticing me looking. "Yeah, just checking traffic," I said. I figured it was the storm messing with the lighting, or maybe the mirror had fogged up. Things like that happen. I adjusted the rearview mirror and kept driving, but it bothered me. About 10 minutes into the drive back to town, the passengers started making conversation. "So you drive full-time?" he asked. "Nights and weekends mostly," I said. "My wife works days at the bank." "First National, right?" I glanced in the rearview mirror again. Still nothing there. "How'd you know that?" "Lucky guess. It's the biggest bank in town." Maybe, but it still felt weird. I kept one eye on the road and tried to see him in the peripheral vision. He was there when I looked directly, gone in the mirror. "You have kids?" he asked. "2 kids, yeah." "Emma and Jake?" My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm sorry, how do you know my kids' names?" "You mentioned them earlier," he said. But I hadn't. I never talk about my family. Fly with passengers. That's rule number 1. "No, I didn't." "Must have been another driver then. Common names." The storm was getting worse, and I was having trouble focusing on the road. Every time I checked the rearview mirror, the back seat was empty, but I could hear him breathing. Except now that I was paying attention, I realized something else was wrong. His breathing never stopped. No pauses, no natural rhythm. Just constant, steady breathing like a machine. "They go to Lincoln Elementary, don't they?" he said. "Emma's in 3rd grade, Jake's in 1st. I pulled over to the side of the highway and turned around to face him. "Okay, who are you? How do you know about my family?" He smiled, and for just a second it looked like he had too many teeth. "I make it my business to know about the people I meet." When I looked at him directly, everything seemed normal. Average guy, regular smile. But when I glanced at the rearview mirror, there was still nothing there. "Look," I said, "I think there's been some mistake. Maybe you should call someone else to pick you up." "But we're almost there," he said, "and I have some things to show you." He held up his phone. On the screen were photos of my kids at school. Emma walking into the building that morning, Jake on the playground at recess. The timestamp showed they were taken just hours ago. "Where did you get these?" My voice was shaking now. "I told you I make it my business to know." I looked in the mirror again. Still empty. But when I turned back to him, his voice sounded different. Deeper, like multiple people talking at the same time. "Derek, you've been very helpful. Your route patterns, your schedule, your family's daily routine. It's all been quite educational." "What are you talking about?" "We've been watching you for weeks, learning how you think, how you act, how you speak. You're a very predictable one." I tried to start the car, but the engine wouldn't turn over. The dashboard lights were flickering, and my phone had gone dead. "The thing is, Derek, we need someone like you. Someone with a family, a job, a normal life. Someone who won't be missed right away." He pointed out the window. Through the storm, I could see shapes moving in the darkness. People standing in the snow, watching my car. Dozens of them, maybe more. My colleagues have been studying your neighbors too, the Johnsons, the Millers, the family with the red pickup truck. We're very thorough. The shapes were getting closer. In the headlights, I could see they all looked normal, like regular people. But something was wrong with the way they moved. What do you want? Your life, he said simply. Your identity, your family, your place in this community. We're going to take it all, and we're going to do it better than you ever did. I looked in the rearview mirror one more time. For just a moment, I saw something that wasn't human, something without a real shape, just darkness with eyes and teeth. Don't look so upset, he said. The new Derek will be an improvement, more successful, more confident. Your family will be happier. I realized then that this thing, whatever it was, had been planning this for weeks. It knew everything about me, about my family, about our lives. It wasn't just some random encounter. This was an invasion. My phone was dead, but I remembered the emergency satellite communicator I kept in the glove compartment for really bad weather. Sarah and I had agreed on a code word if anything bad ever happened. Overtime. I pretended to reach for my registration and grabbed the communicator instead. Sent a quick message to Sarah. Overtime. Take kids to your mother's. Now. What are you doing? The thing asked. Just getting my paperwork, I said. But it laughed. That sound like multiple voices. Oh, Derek, you think your wife will believe some random message? She'll think you're working late again. Outside, the shapes were surrounding my car. I could see them clearly now in the headlights. They looked like normal people, but they all moved exactly the same way, like they were copies of the same person. Here's what's going to happen, the thing said. You're going to drive me to your house. I'm going to walk inside, kiss your wife hello, and tuck your children into bed. And they'll never know the difference. Like hell I will. I threw the car in reverse and hit the gas. The thing in my back seat let out a sound I can't describe, like screaming and static and something breaking all at once. In the rearview mirror, I finally saw what it really looked like. It wasn't human at all. Just a mass of darkness with parts of faces floating in it. Eyes and mouths and teeth that didn't belong together. I drove straight through 3 of the shapes standing behind my car. They scattered like smoke, then reformed as I sped away. You can't escape us, Derek, the thing said, but its voice was fading. We know where you live. We know where your family is. We'll find them. Maybe, I said, but they won't be there. I drove straight to the police station, crashed through the parking lot gates, and ran inside screaming about creatures and invasion and things that steal people's lives. They thought I was crazy at first, until they sent a unit to check my house. The house was surrounded by those shapes. When the police arrived with their lights and sirens, the things just melted away into the storm. The FBI got involved after they found evidence that similar disappearances had been happening in small towns across Alaska, Montana, and northern Canada. People vanishing, then showing up days later with no memory of where they'd been. Except they weren't quite the same anymore. They relocated my family under new identities. Sarah works at a different bank now, kids go to a different school. We live in a place with more people, better secure it. Where things like this are harder to hide. I don't drive for rideshare companies anymore. I work at a warehouse during the day, regular hours, surrounded by other people. But I still check mirrors constantly. Still look at my family every morning to make sure they're really them. The FBI calls me sometimes when they find evidence of similar activities. I help them identify the signs, the patterns, how to tell when someone in your community might not be who they claim to be. Because here's what I learned that night. Identity theft isn't just about credit cards and bank accounts. Sometimes it's about stealing everything you are, everything you've built, everyone you love. And the scariest part is, if these things are good enough at copying us, how would we ever know? I still get ride requests sometimes on my old phone. Always from closed gas stations, always during storms. I delete the app, get a new number, but somehow they still find me. The thing is, I don't think what happened to me was random. I think they're still out there, still watching, still learning. And maybe next time, they'll be better at it. So if someone you know starts acting a little different, asking questions they shouldn't know to ask, or if you catch them in a mirror and something doesn't look right, pay attention. Because the person sitting next to you might not be a person at all. And if you ever get a ride request from a closed gas station on a stormy night, just stay home. Trust me on that one. Dr. Chen. This is Dr. Sarah Chen recording on March 15th, 2024. I'm here with Marcus Daniels, who contacted our department about an incident that occurred this past February. Marcus, can you state your name and occupation for the record? Marcus. My name is Marcus Daniels. I was a delivery driver for Northern Express Shipping, was being the key word there. Dr. Chen. You mentioned this incident happened during an extreme weather event. Marcus. February 14th, Valentine's Day, if you can believe that. We had a massive storm system moving in. Temperature dropped to minus 43 degrees that night. Wind chill made it feel like minus 70. Most drivers wouldn't go out in conditions like that, but I needed the overtime pay. See, my daughter Emma has leukemia. 8 years old, and the treatments, they cost more than I make in 6 months. So when dispatch offered triple pay for emergency deliveries during the storm, I took it. I'd have driven through hell itself for that money. Dr. Chen. Tell me about your route that night. Marcus. I had 12 stops, all medical deliveries, insulin, heart medication, cancer drugs, stuff people would die without. The last stop was way out on Dead Man's Trail, about 60 miles north of Fairbanks. GPS coordinates only. No street address. Package for someone named Robert Hendricks. I should have known something was wrong when I saw the delivery instructions. They were handwritten, not printed like usual. Just said, delivered a cabin with blue door, signature required, do not leave unattended. Dr. Chen. You'd never been to this location before, Marcus? Never. And I've been driving Alaska routes for 12 years. I know every road, every trail, every cabin from Anchorage to the Arctic Circle. But those coordinates, they led me somewhere that shouldn't exist. The first 11 deliveries went fine, considering the weather. My truck was handling the ice okay, and people were grateful to get their medications. But as I headed out toward Dead Man's Trail, the storm got worse. Snow was coming down so thick I could barely see my own headlights. Around mile 40, my GPS started acting strange. Instead of the usual blue line showing my route, it kept flickering between different paths, like it couldn't decide which road I was actually on. Then it started showing locations that made no sense, placing me in the middle of frozen lakes, or 20 miles underground. But the really weird thing was my truck's internal temperature sensor. It was reading the outside temperature at minus 68 degrees. That's not possible. Even in Alaska, even during the worst storms, it doesn't get that cold. Not naturally. I tried calling dispatch on my satellite phone, but all I got was static. Not normal static. This sounded like whispers. Dozens of voices talking at once, too quiet to understand but loud enough to make my skin crawl. When I finally found the coordinates, there was no road. Just a narrow trail between massive pine trees barely wide enough for my truck. The trees were wrong too. They were too tall, too thick, and they weren't moving in the wind. Everything else was swaying and bending in that storm. But these trees stood perfectly still. The cabin sat in a small clearing about half a mile down that trail. It looked old, really old, like it had been there since Alaska was still Russian territory. Dark wood logs, metal roof, and, yes, a blue door. But there were no power lines running to it, no vehicle tracks in the snow, no smoke from the chimney. Nothing to suggest anyone actually lived there. But there were lights in the windows, not electric lights. These flickered like candles or oil lamps, and they were moving like someone was carrying them from room to room. I parked my truck and grabbed the package. It was about the size of a shoebox, but it was cold. Not just normal cold from being in my truck. This thing was so cold it burned my hands through my insulated gloves, and it was humming. A low, barely audible vibration that I could feel in my chest. I knocked on that blue door 3 times, standard procedure. But instead of footsteps, I heard something else. Scratching. like fingernails on wood coming from inside the walls. Not just one set of nails, dozens of them, all scratching at once. "Delivery for Robert Hendricks," I called out. The scratching stopped. Complete silence. Then a voice answered from inside. "Just leave it on the step." But here's the thing. It was my voice. My exact voice. With my accent. My speech pattern. Even the way I clear my throat when I'm nervous. Someone inside that cabin was talking to me using my own voice. "I need a signature," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Come inside," my voice replied from the cabin. "It's too cold out there." I backed away from the door. Company policy is clear. Never enter a customer's home. Always get signatures at the door or bring the package back. But as I turned to leave, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Footprints in the snow leading from the cabin to my truck. Fresh prints made while I was at the door. But they weren't normal footprints. They were too long, too narrow, and instead of 5 toes, there were only 4. And they went all the way around my truck like someone or something had been inspecting it. That's when I noticed the scratches. Deep gouges in my truck's metal, spelling out words. "Stay with us, Marcus." But I'd never told anyone at that cabin my name. I ran back to my truck and tried to start it. The engine turned over, but something was wrong. It sounded different, rougher, like it was struggling, and my fuel gauge, which had shown 3/4 full, now read empty. Through my windshield, I saw the blue door opening. What came out wasn't human. It walked on 2 legs and wore clothes, but its proportions were all wrong. Too tall, too thin, arms that hung down past its knees, and its face. God, its face was like a rough sketch of a human drawn by someone who'd never actually seen one. But the worst part was that it was wearing my uniform, my exact Northern Express jacket, my name tag, even the coffee stain I'd gotten that morning. It was dressed like me, but it moved like a broken marionette. More figures came out of the cabin, all of them wearing delivery uniforms. UPS, FedEx, USPS, DHL, all the drivers who'd disappeared over the years. But these weren't the missing drivers. These were things wearing their clothes, copying their appearance. They surrounded my truck, pressing their faces against the windows. Up close, I could see their eyes were just black holes, and their mouths moved wrong when they talked. They were all speaking in different voices, the voices of every driver who'd ever made a delivery to that cabin. "Stay with us, Marcus," they said in unison. "We need to learn. We need to practice." "Learn what?" I shouted through the window. "How to be you." My truck wouldn't start. The engine was completely dead. But I remembered the emergency flare gun I kept in my glove compartment, required equipment for winter driving in Alaska. I fired it directly at the closest figure. The flare hit it in the chest and passed right through like it was made of smoke. But the light seemed to hurt them. They all stepped back, covering their faces with their 2 long arms. I fired 2 more flares and made a run for it. I don't remember much about the next few hours. I know I ran through that forest in -40-degree weather, following my own tire tracks back to the main road. I know I collapsed from hypothermia about 3 miles from the highway and was found by a snowplow driver the next morning. What I do remember is looking back once, about halfway through my escape, and seeing dozens, ends of lights moving through the trees behind me. Flashlights maybe, or lanterns. But they were moving too fast, and there were too many of them. Like an entire search party was following me through the woods. The official report said I suffered severe hypothermia and hallucinations due to exposure. They found my truck a week later, completely stripped. Engine, transmission, wheels, everything valuable was gone. The police assumed it was stolen by scavengers. But I know what really happened to it. They took it apart to study it, to learn how Marcus Daniels' truck worked, how it sounded, how it smelled, just like they were planning to take me apart and study how Marcus Daniels worked. Dr. Chen. Marcus, I have to ask, have you sought psychological counseling for this experience? Marcus. Dr. Chen, I know how this sounds. I know what the logical explanation is. But 3 weeks after my hallucination, Northern Express got a call from someone claiming to be Marcus Daniels. He said he'd recovered from his hypothermia and wanted his job back. The thing is, I was in a hospital in Seattle at the time. Had been for 2 weeks. Dr. Chen. What happened to this other Marcus? Marcus. He worked there for about a month before other drivers started complaining. They said he moved wrong, talked wrong. He knew all the delivery routes perfectly, but he didn't know anyone's names. He'd call customers human female or human male, instead of using their actual names. Management thought he had brain damage from the hypothermia. They were going to send him for medical evaluation, but he disappeared, just stopped showing up to work one day. Dr. Chen. And you believe this was one of the entities from the cabin? Marcus. I know it was, because 2 days after he disappeared, my daughter Emma got a visitor at the hospital. A man in a Northern Express uniform who said he was her daddy's coworker. He brought her a teddy bear and sat with her for an hour while my ex-wife was getting coffee. Emma told me later that the man asked her lots of questions about me, what I like, said to eat, how I talked to her, what I called her when she was scared. He was studying me through my daughter. The security cameras showed a man in my uniform, but his face was blurred in every single frame, like he was moving too fast for the camera to focus, even though Emma said he sat perfectly still the whole time. Dr. Chen. Where are you now? Are you still in Alaska? Marcus. I moved to Arizona 6 months ago. Desert climate, lots of people around, nothing but suburbs and strip malls for 100 miles in every direction. I thought I'd be safe here. But last week, I got a package delivered to my apartment. No return address, no delivery company logo. Inside was a Northern Express name tag with my name on it, and a note written in my own handwriting that said, "We're still learning." The thing is, Dr. Chen, I've been keeping a journal since the incident, writing down everything I remember, everything I do each day, trying to document who Marcus Daniels really is. But when I compared the handwriting on that note to my journal entries, they matched perfectly. Something out there has learned to write like me. And if it can write like me, it can probably forge my signature, my bank documents, my medical records, my identity papers, everything that proves I'm me. Dr. Chen. Have you contacted the authorities? Marcus. What would I tell them? That shape-shifting monsters in Alaska are planning to steal my identity? They'd put me in a psychiatric ward. No, Dr. Chen. I'm telling you because you study folklore. And maybe somewhere in all those old stories there's an answer. Because I don't think these things are new. I think they've been in Alaska for a long time, taking people one by one, learning to be us. And I think they're getting better at it. Dr. Chen. Marcus, before we finish, is there anything else you want to add? Marcus. Just this. If anyone listening to this recording works a job that takes them to remote places alone, delivery driver, repair technician, home health nurse, anyone, be careful of addresses that don't feel right. If your GPS acts up, if your radio gets strange signals, if the location doesn't match what you know about the area, just turn around and leave. Don't worry about company policy or customer satisfaction or losing money. Your life is worth more than any job. And if you ever get a delivery to a cabin with a blue door somewhere out on Dead Man's Trail north of Fairbanks, just drive away. Drive as fast as you can and don't look back. Because some packages aren't meant to be delivered, and some customers aren't customers at all. They're just things that are still learning how to be human. Addendum, Dr. Chen's notes. Mr. Daniels' account matches several elements found in Athabascan legends about hollow people who steal identities. I've scheduled follow-up interviews, but he failed to appear for his next appointment. His apartment manager reported he moved out suddenly, leaving no forwarding address. I've submitted a request to Northern Express for employment records, but they claim to have no record of anyone named Marcus Daniels ever working for their company. They also state that no drivers have disappeared from their northern routes in the past 5 years. Most disturbing, I received a package yesterday with no return address. Inside was a university ID badge with my name and photo, but the signature on the back isn't mine. It's close, but not quite right. Like someone practiced writing my name but didn't get it perfect. I'm considering a transfer to the University of Hawaii. Dr. Sarah Chen, March 20th, 2024. My name is Jason Miller, and I'm sharing this story because people need to know what's really happening in the remote places of Alaska. What I'm about to tell you happened last winter at a mining site that officially doesn't exist anymore. The government classifies these incidents, mining companies bury the reports, and survivors like me get labeled as suffering isolation psychosis. But this is the truth, and I have proof. I've been working security for 15 years. Started when I was 19, right after my dad died in a construction accident. Mom couldn't afford college, so I got my security license and worked every shift I could find. Mall security, construction sites, corporate offices. I've done it all. I'm good at my job because I pay attention to details other people miss. I notice when something's wrong before it becomes dangerous. The thing is, I chose security work because I like being alone. I grew up in a house full of screaming, dads drinking, moms crying, my brother getting arrested every few months. Quiet nights watching empty buildings felt peaceful. I thought I understood solitude. I thought I knew what it meant to be alone. I was wrong. The Kodiak Ridge job came through my agency in late October. Solo winter assignment, Alaska mining operation, 4 months, triple pay. My supervisor warned me that isolation jobs mess with people's heads, especially in Alaska. The darkness gets to you, he said. Last guy we sent up there lasted 6 weeks before he started talking to imaginary coworkers. But I needed the money. My mom's medical bills from her stroke were piling up, and this job would cover everything. I'd done solo assignments before, a month here, 2 months there. How different could 4 months be? The flight to Anchorage was my first mistake. I should have noticed the way the other passengers looked when I mentioned Kodiak Ridge. The businessman next to me went quiet and moved to a different seat. The flight attendant asked twice if I was sure about my destination. Dave Morrison, the site manager, picked me up at the airport. 60 years old, weathered face, hands permanently stained with motor oil. During the 3-hour drive to the site, he told me about the place. Kodiak Ridge has been operating for 12 years, he said, chain smoking while he drove. Good copper mine, employs about 40 people during season, but we've had problems with winter security. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. You're the 4th guard we've hired this year. What happened to the other 3? First guy quit after 2 weeks. Said he heard voices. Second one lasted a month before he started sending crazy radio reports about something watching him. Third guy, Dave's cigarette trembled slightly. We found him in his truck, trying to drive out in a blizzard. Frostbite took 3 of his fingers. Kept saying something was coming for him. The mining site sat in a valley surrounded by mountains and thick forest. 40 miles from the nearest town, 60 from any real help. The facility looked normal enough. Main office building, equipment sheds, processing plant, worker housing. But something felt wrong immediately. The place was too quiet. Even abandoned, there should have been normal sounds. Wind through buildings, settling metal, small animals. Instead, there was just silence. My home for the next 4 months was trailer number 7, a double-wide with a wood stove and enough supplies to last until spring. Dave showed me the security equipment. Motion sensors, cameras, radio setup. Radio check every Tuesday and Friday, he said. Miss a check, and we send someone up here. Before he left, Dave handed me a rifle. For bears, he said. But the way he looked at me suggested he didn't think bears were the real problem. Dave, I said as he got in his truck, what really happened to those other guards? He lit another cigarette with shaking hands. Just pay attention, kid. Trust your instincts. And if something doesn't feel right, don't try to be a hero. Call for help immediately. The first week passed normally. I fell into a routine. Morning patrol, equipment checks, radio contact, evening patrol. The motion sensors picked up deer and the occasional moose. The cameras recorded normal wildlife activity. I started to relax, thinking the previous guards had just cracked under the isolation. But Alaska's winter darkness is different from anything I'd experienced. By November, I was getting maybe 4 hours of weak sunlight. The rest was darkness so complete it felt solid. The cold was brutal, 40 below on warm days. The wind made sounds I'd never heard before, like voices crying in the distance. On my 8th day, I found the first footprint. I was doing my morning patrol when I saw it in the fresh snow near the equipment shed. At first glance, it looked human, the basic shape of a foot, but it was massive, 18 inches long, maybe 6 inches wide, and there were claw marks where the toes should be. I measured it carefully, took photos from every angle. The depth suggested something incredibly heavy, much heavier than a human. The stride between prints was nearly 7 feet, longer than any person could manage. But it was the intelligence behind the prints that scared me. They weren't random animal tracks. This thing had walked a deliberate perimeter around each building, testing doors and windows. It had approached my trailer and circled it 3 times before heading back into the forest. Something was studying the facility, learning the layout. That night, I reviewed the security footage. At 2:47 a.m., something moved between the buildings. The camera caught it for maybe 3 seconds. Tall, dark, covered in hair. It walked upright like a person, but it was huge, over 9 feet tall, with arms that reached nearly to its knees. But what terrified me was how it moved. This wasn't some dumb animal wandering through. It avoided the direct camera angles, stayed in shadows, moved with purpose. It was mapping the site. I called Dave during my Friday radio check. "I found some unusual tracks," I said carefully. "Large animal, possibly dangerous." "What kind of tracks?" "I'm not sure. Big, bipedal, doesn't match anything I know." There was a long pause. "Jason, listen to me carefully. If you see anything unusual, anything at all, you call immediately. Don't try to investigate on your own." "Is there something you didn't tell me about this place?" Another pause. "Just be careful, kid." The howling started that weekend. It began around midnight, long, echoing calls that filled the valley. I'd heard wolves before, but this was different. The sound was too deep, too controlled. It reminded me of someone trying to imitate wolf calls without really understanding them. The calls came from different directions, north, then south, then west, like something was moving around the perimeter, calling to others, or calling to me. I spent that night at my window with the rifle, watching the darkness. Every few minutes, the howling would start again, closer each time. By dawn, I was exhausted and paranoid. The next morning brought more tracks. This time, they circled my trailer in a tight spiral, getting closer to the door with each loop. At the center of the spiral, something had arranged small stones in a perfect triangle. That's when I realized this thing wasn't just intelligent. It was trying to communicate. I started finding gifts, dead rabbits at first, laid out in neat rows beside my trailer door. Each one had its neck broken cleanly. No blood, no struggle. Just a precise snap that would require incredible strength and knowledge of anatomy. Then squirrels, arranged in geometric patterns. Then a small deer, positioned, head sitting upright against my trailer like it was guarding the door. The precision was unnatural, deliberate. Something was leaving me offerings. I set up additional motion sensors around the trailer and increased my patrols. The thing triggered the sensors once, then never again. It had learned what they were and how to avoid them. During my Tuesday radio check, something went wrong. I reached Dave normally, gave my report, and signed off. 20 minutes later, the radio crackled again. "Jason, this is Base. Can you confirm your location?" It was Dave's voice, but something was wrong. The phrasing was off, too formal. "Dave, we just talked 20 minutes ago." "Negative, Jason. No contact today. Please confirm your status." I tried calling back on the backup frequency. When I reached Dave, he was confused. "I only talked to you once today," he insisted. "Haven't heard from you since Friday." Something had perfectly mimicked Dave's voice, copying his speech patterns and radio protocols. Whatever was out there was learning human communication. The scratches appeared the next week. I woke to find symbols carved into my trailer's aluminum siding. Not random scratches, deliberate markings that looked like writing. The symbols were 8 feet off the ground and went completely around the trailer. They were fresh, still bright metal showing through the paint. I photographed every mark and sent the images to a linguist friend from college. Her response chilled me. These symbols appear to be a writing system. The patterns suggest complex grammar and abstract thinking. Where did you find these? Something was not only intelligent enough to develop written language, it was using that language to mark my home. My food started going bad. Everything in my trailer developed a foul smell, like it had been marked with some kind of scent. The water from my storage tank tasted wrong. Even sealed canned goods smelled rotten when I opened them. I was being systematically isolated from my supplies. The daytime sightings started in early December, dark shapes moving between trees, always just at the edge of vision. But I could see enough to know it wasn't natural. Too tall, wrong proportions, movements too coordinated. One morning I was checking the fuel depot when I heard my own voice calling from the forest. "Help me! Jason, help me!" It was my exact voice, my accent, my speech patterns. But I was standing alone in the snow, and the voice was coming from 50 yards away. "Jason, I'm hurt! Help me!" I raised the rifle and backed toward the building. The voice followed me, always staying hidden in the trees, pleading for help in my own words. It was learning psychological warfare. On December 15th, I saw it clearly. I was patrolling near the processing plant when movement caught my eye. At the tree line, maybe 60 yards away, something stood watching me. 9 feet tall, covered in dark brown hair, with arms that hung past its knees. But it was the face that stopped my heart. It was almost human. Intelligent eyes, expressive features, but wrong in every proportion. The jaw was too wide, the forehead too prominent, the eyes too knowing. It studied me with the focused attention of a scientist examining a specimen. We stared at each other for 30 seconds. Then it spoke. "Jason." The voice was layered, multiple tones speaking in unison, slightly out of sync. My name echoed across the valley in that terrible harmonic voice. It knew who I was. I ran back to my trailer and grabbed the radio. Nothing but static on every frequency. When I checked my truck, the battery cables had been cut with surgical precision. My backup radio equipment was destroyed, not smashed, but carefully dismantled. I was completely cut off from help. That night, it came for me. Heavy footsteps circled my trailer for hours, scratching sounds on the walls, testing every surface, something large moving on the roof, probing for weak points. The motion sensors scream, ed constantly, until the cables were ripped from the ground. Through the windows, I could see its shadow pacing around my home. Occasionally, it would stop and tap on the glass with something. Hard, not trying to break in, just letting me know it was there. Around 3 a.m., it started talking. "Jason, let me in." My own voice, pleading from outside. "I'm cold, Jason. Please help me." Then other voices. Dave's voice, my mother's voice, voices of people I'd known, all begging me to open the door, all perfectly mimicked down to the smallest detail. "Your mother needs you, Jason." Mom's voice, weak from her stroke. "The medical bills. You need to come home." It was using my memories, my guilt, my love for my mother as weapons. I spent the night huddled by the wood stove, rifle across my knees, listening to the voices of everyone I cared about pleading from outside my door. By morning, I'd made a decision. The main office building had the strongest security and a landline phone. If I could reach it, I might be able to call for help. I gathered my emergency supplies and made a run for it. The thing followed me every step. I could hear it moving through the trees parallel to my path, sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind. It was hurting me, controlling my route. When I stopped to rest, it would call out in various voices, reminding me it was there. "Don't leave me, Jason." My father's voice, the first time I'd heard it in 15 years. "You're all I have left." I made it to the office building and barricaded myself inside. The landline was dead, but I found an emergency satellite phone in the manager's desk. After hours of trying, I reached the Alaska State Troopers. "This is emergency dispatch. State your emergency." This is Jason Miller at Kodiak Ridge Mining. I need immediate evacuation. There's something here and it's hunting me. The dispatcher was professional but skeptical. I gave them my GPS coordinates and tried to explain without sounding insane. They said they'd send help when weather permitted. I waited 4 days in that building, living on Vendi, machine snacks and bottled water. The thing never left. I could see it through the windows, sometimes standing upright to stare directly at me, sometimes pacing in complex patterns around the building. On the third night, it began a new strategy. It started recreating conversations from my past, entire phone calls with my mother, arguments with my brother, job interviews, perfect reproduction of voices, timing, emotional inflection. It had somehow accessed my memories and was playing them back. "You're just like your father," my mother's voice said from outside. "Never there when people need you most." It was trying to break my mind. The rescue helicopter arrived on a clear Thursday morning. 2 state troopers and a paramedic found me barricaded in the office, 30 pounds lighter and suffering from severe sleep deprivation. They documented everything: the footprints, the scratches, the damaged equipment. They collected hair samples and made plaster casts. The lab results were classified. Hair samples didn't match any known species. DNA analysis showed a mixture of human and unknown genetic markers. Footprint analysis indicated a bipedal creature weighing over 800 pounds with intelligence comparable to early hominids. The mining company permanently shut down Kodiak Ridge. The official reason was geological instability, but I know the truth. They couldn't risk more incidents. My contract included a non-disclosure agreement and a substantial payment for my pain and suffering. But I couldn't let it go. I spent months researching similar encounters across Alaska and northern Canada. What I found terrified me more than my own experience. There were dozens of reports spanning decades, all describing the same creature, the same behaviors, the same escalating intelligence. The reports showed a pattern. Early encounters from the 1970s described a primitive creature, aggressive but essentially animal-like. But each decade showed increased sophistication, better mimicry, more complex behaviors, improved hunting strategies. It was evolving. Learning from each human encounter. The most recent reports described creatures that could perfectly mimic human voices, understand technology, and employ psychological warfare. Some described organized groups working together, using tools, even basic agriculture. I found government files, partially redacted, referring to Project Kodiak, a classified study of non-human intelligence in North American wilderness. The files suggested the government has been tracking these creatures for 50 years, documenting their rapid evolution and increasing threat to isolated human populations. I tried to warn people. I contacted journalists, wrote letters to paranormal investigators, posted on forums. Most people dismissed me as another crazy isolation victim. But some listened. Other security guards, oil workers, researchers, people who'd seen things they couldn't explain. We formed an informal network sharing information and warnings. The picture that emerged was terrifying. These creatures are spreading across Alaska and northern Canada, establishing territories around human industrial sites. They're studying us, learning our weaknesses, preparing for something. I still work security, but everything has changed. I only take urban assignments now, never alone, never remote. I carry multiple communication devices and research the history of every site I'm assigned to, because I know what's really happening in the Alaskan wilderness. We're not dealing with some random cryptid or primitive beast. We're facing an intelligent species that's using humanity as a training ground. They're learning how to hunt us, how to manipulate us, how to break us down psychologically, and they're getting better at it. The Kodiak Ridge facility remains abandoned, surrounded by government warning signs about unstable geological conditions. But satellite imagery shows movement around the site, structures being built, patterns of activity that suggest permanent habitation. They've claimed it as their own. And they're not alone anymore. Every winter, more remote workers disappear or suffer psychological breaks. More sites get abandoned. More areas become off-limits to human activity. We're slowly being pushed out of the wilderness, one facility at a time. I'm telling this story because people need to know. The next person who takes an isolated job in Alaska might not survive to tell about it. These creatures are no longer content to observe and learn. They're ready to hunt, and we taught them everything they need to know.